I think we're on.
I think we are.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Peter Marison. I'm the CTO here at Concordium, and I've got Andy with me, who's our Director of Engineering. And today we're going to have a quick conversation about the latest protocol update, P10, and everything that's kind of come before and everything that's now part of the new release. We'll try to keep it on a high level to begin with, just to kind of get the gist of what it is. And then a bit later on, we'll go into a bit more technical details. So if you're developers here waiting to see what it's all about, bear with us. We'll get through it. And if you're not developers and you want to knock off once we've done at the high level, then by all means you can. Cool. So I guess let's get going, Andy, and we'll have a quick chat about where we are and what we're doing. So, as you know, just in case there's a few new joiners and you've never heard about Concordium or what we are, I'll give you a quick update. We are a layer 1 blockchain. We have some unique features in our chain, the most famous being the fact that we have identity at the protocol layer, which in short basically means you can't have an account without having your identity verified on chain. It's very privacy preserving. Nobody sees that information. It's safe in your device. There's lots of information about it. So if you're interested, I'd say go and read our documentation and look it up on our website. But today, mainly, we want to talk about our latest protocol, which is Protocol 10. When did it go live, Andy? What's the exact time? Do you have it?
It was Tuesday, and it was 10 a.m. GMT or UTC. And after a small amount of updating of state at 10:04, the first block of P10 was produced.
There you go. And I do know that, I think we were talking about it earlier. It's like we've done this many times. We're Protocol 10 now, so we know what we're doing. And yet there's always this anticipation where everyone's watching the screen, waiting for that block to be produced. And there's always that extra, it takes that little bit too many seconds longer and you start doubting yourself, but there you go. And then it comes out.
That's it. A lot of breath got let out at 10:04.
Yeah, exactly. And again, kudos to the team. Well done, everybody. Fantastic work as always in getting kind of a small protocol update done there. It's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes in making these things happen, and kind of, I guess sometimes it just gets for granted that it just magically happened. There's a lot of people that do a lot of magic behind the scenes. So, kudos to everybody there, and yourself, Andy, because you're heavily involved in it.
Absolutely. The team did a really good job of just making it look like magic.
Cool. So I guess let's just do a bit of a recap as to kind of what the chain has, why we are where we are, and kind of why this latest release adds to that tool set that we have on the chain. So obviously, as we said, this is Protocol 10. Just before this was Protocol 9, and before that was Protocol 8, and 8 gave us that stability. It was the kind of ability to, suspend our validators who aren't necessarily keeping up to speed, so it brought stability to the chain. Then came P9, which was our PLTs. Which was at the protocol level tokens. We have always had this approach that we want to keep things safe and in your custody, not in smart contracts and not in the custody of the smart contract or whoever wrote the smart contract. Our ability to kind of have these tokens at the protocol level alongside the actual CCD token that exists on the chain was a big breakthrough. We have had a whole bunch of stable coins which have come and issued on the chain as well in 2025. And we've continued with this narrative of protocol-led security. And now we've launched our P10. Andy, I suppose give us a little bit about what P10 is at a high level, and then we'll get into more detail.
Yeah, so I think the big thing about P10 is it allows us to now have transaction sponsorship. So all of our transaction fees are paid in CCD, which is the native token of the chain. But since we introduced the protocol level tokens, which allows things like stable coins to act within the protocol layer, we were looking at the situation where if we want real world adoption where people are spending stable coins that are effectively dollars or euros, pounds or whatever currency, the need for them to also hold a very small amount of CCD to pay transaction fees is a little bit of a blocker in terms of consumer usage. In an ideal world, you just want to spend your dollar. And so what Protocol 10 brings in is that ability for somebody to sponsor the transaction. So a merchant, for example, a shop, can construct the transaction that's the right amount for what you're buying from the shop. They can pre-sponsor it, give it to the wallet, and all you sign for is you're spending PLTs. You don't need to have or care about CCDs in that situation.
And I guess, I mean, this is perfect. Thanks for that explanation. And I think this is kind of where the subtlety comes into it as well. I mean, our fees are pegged to the euro anyway, so they're fixed. I mean, if the price of the token goes up and down, the cost of the transaction at the euro cent still stays the same. And now we've kind of added that extra ability for a merchant to be able to keep control of what it's doing and have hence customers come and trade with it without having this extra step and maintain its fees that it's got going, which is kind of why we're all excited about everything that's coming around the corner regarding this. And I guess just again, staying at a high level, does it really matter who sponsors the transaction? Like, how is it at a high level?
So that's one of the nice things about what the team designed is that no, the transaction is one of the transactions we had before with some slight changes to the headers that say there is a sponsor and the sponsor will pay the transaction fees. And as long as both parties have signed it, so the sponsor and the person making the transaction, as long as they both signed it, it doesn't matter which order they get signed in, and it doesn't matter who submits it. So you could either give a transaction to a sponsor, asking them to sponsor it, have them sign it, they put it on the chain, or they can give you a transaction they've already sponsored and you put it on the chain. Either way, it works the same.
Yeah, and I think that's the key thing, and we'll get into the nitty-gritty of what's in the headers and how it all comes back in a minute. But I think just again staying at what this actually means for the chain and adoption more than anything else, right? So I've definitely got very excited from day one, saying I want to do that verify and pay single kind of button click, right? Where I rock up to a merchant, I want to buy something, and I press that button, and it verifies my age and makes the payment, and we're up and running. And I think just going back a little about what you just said, for an average user who's just gonna on-ramp and start using this mechanism, right? It kind of makes sense to be able to get hold of a currency that you understand and know, like dollars, euros, etc., which you can hold in a wallet. And now that side of things is forever growing in this sector anyway. On-ramping is becoming easier. Exchanges are becoming more kind of adopted. Banks are beginning to hold stable coins and whatnot. So, the vision is kind of coming true. What we said at the beginning of 25, where average users are going to be able to hold some sort of stable coin currency. The next thing that comes with that is if you ever want to spend that currency, if you want to send it to a merchant, you now have to have this underlying fee structure of the network that it sits on. And that's kind of where this comes in, right? Where we want to be able to say, well, you understand dollars and euros and whatever currency that you're dealing with, just stick to that as a user. Right. And the merchant who is going to be able to take these payments in is the one who needs to worry about the fees and the network and what goes with it. So it's just kind of making sure that we for the people who are listening right now as merchants or as people who are interested in, well, how do I take these payments? That's really what it is. It's the ability to be able to say, look, don't worry about holding this currency that you've never heard of, or don't worry about on-ramping it somewhere or finding it even. Just have the stable coins that you know of and you're comfortable with, and I'll take care of the rest. And it should be a relatively easy thing to implement as a merchant, right? As in, what's the kind of high level view of that?
No, absolutely. In terms of merchant implementation, it's really just having a signer in the back end, which as a shop you're going to need anyway, because you need to construct a transaction for somebody to sign with the right amounts in it. You just add the fact that you're signing that transaction as the sponsor. Our DevRel team have already put together some demo dApps on how you can do this. It's all in our SDKs in very easy to consume for developers ways.
Awesome. And is it specific to a transaction, the sponsored part?
So the sponsorship is per transaction, but it works for any of our on-chain transactions. So it's not just for PLT. You could sponsor any of our transactions.
Okay, so if the use case has like certificate issuance or things like that, or interaction with a smart contract or anything like that, the merchant can also sponsor all those transactions as well.
All works the same way, yes.
Awesome, fantastic. And I guess the other thing here, just to elaborate on, is we have the ability in our PLTs to do multiple kind of actions within the one transaction request, right? So I could mint it, I could add someone to the allow list, and then I can do the transfer. And is that all covered in the same way with the same sponsor transaction? So it doesn't matter about how many I'm doing.
Absolutely. So
Cool.
multiple transfers, multiple operations, as you say, on PLTs, and in the future, new transactions that we bring in will be covered by this. It's built in a future-proof way that any transaction we add to the chain will automatically inherit this ability to be sponsored.
Awesome, fantastic. And I guess just the subtlety, because people listening might be going, well, I can already do that with my kind of tap on a card or things like that. And I think the subtlety here is to understand there's always a cost in you tapping that card, the massive network that actually runs in the background that no one really cares or asks about, like, what is it costing? And, if as Trevor is always, changing the cost of trust, this is kind of what we mean, because we are very transparent as a blockchain. There is only one fee. There is no card network you're paying. You're just doing a transaction. Your merchant is very knowingly paying a stable fee in a domination of euros that kind of doesn't matter about the fluctuations or things like that, and there's no hidden charges for the merchant either. And I think there's a subtlety there in the background for anyone who's listening as to kind of why it is a bit different to what already exists, right? And of course, the whole thing is backed by the fact that it is a blockchain. It has the cryptography to make it secure. It has the PLTs, which aren't in a smart contract, and you have underlying, as we started at the beginning, everything linked to this identity that exists on the chain. So it's kind of got a lot of ticks when you start thinking about what the use cases are. Awesome. Anything else you want to add, Andy, from your side at a high level before we start diving a little bit in?
No, I think touching on what you said about cards, because that is a really good comparison. When we look at what happens when you use your debit card or your credit card, yes, you just tap it and the merchant charges you the ticket item of what you're buying. In the background, though, they're either paying a percentage of that transaction to the card network or they're paying a fixed fee. And we've seen over the years various points in time where there would be a surcharge for using a card, or wouldn't accept cards below a certain value of payment because of the cost to them was higher than the profit on the goods. To the point where a lot of Western countries now have legislation saying you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to charge people extra because they're using a credit card, because it's supposed to be invisible. And what this does is it brings that little piece of the CCD-based transaction fee, which is significantly lower than a card transaction fee anyway. And it just makes that transparent again. So when you see something and the price on it is $19.95, your transaction is $19.95. It's not $19.25 and some magic buttons.
Yeah, well, I mean, exactly. I think that's the whole point, right? That's kind of why we started in this direction. Now we went in. Okay, cool. Let's kind of dive in a little bit into the more techie stuff. The stuff that me and you talk about all the time, and we enjoy it. I'm not sure everyone else does, but we're on the call, so they're going to come with us. Right. So I guess what we're saying is it's a new structure to the header. So let's kind of dive that into it. Is the old header still there? Is this a new header? How does a developer who's going to kind of now has been or is going to be working with Concordium, what's the things to kind of keep in mind?
So the old header's still there. All the old transaction types, anything you built a year ago, 2 years ago, is just going to keep working.
Cool.
What we've done with P10 is we've introduced basically a second class of transaction that is the same as the old. The payloads are all the same. The only difference is that the header has a couple of extra fields. Sponsor, which is optional, and then basically a field that says which extra features are enabled. So we've got extensibility there. We could add other protocol level transaction capabilities, but the first one is sponsored transactions. So if you want a sponsored transaction, you just add the headers that say it wants to be a sponsored transaction. And again, this is all abstracted into our SDK. So if you're using one of our SDKs, it's just a slight difference to the call that you make because you want it sponsored. and you specify who the sponsor is.
Cool. Just to kind of pick on that subtlety there, you kind of said it as well. Is like, so this protocol update isn't just the fact that we've added sponsored transactions at a header level. The way we've added it kind of sets us up for future changes to be added to that header, so that we can carry on kind of building the chain at the protocol level in a simpler way.
Absolutely. One of the things that we considered was, if we want to add more functionality like this, we don't want to introduce like a new version of the header. Let's have a version that allows for the expansibility.
Awesome. Fantastic. And I guess let's kind of dive a little bit about what are the kind of the nuances in the new header structure. Like, so if I'm a developer of a merchant, and I get told by our CEO that, I'm going to use the Concordium sponsored transaction where it says go and download the SDK. Obviously, I'm going to need to set myself up an account. I'm going to need to fund it because I'm going to have to pay for these transactions. And then what's a typical flow? Because I know we can do many flows, but let's just go through a typical flow and the sequence.
Yeah, so the typical flow that we think is probably the optimal one is that as a merchant, you do what you would have done previously when the payer was going to pay the CCD fees. So you have something like a Wallet Connect connection to their wallet. You find out their address through that. You specify the amount, which token it is. You do a calculation of what the gas fees are likely to be. Now, previously, you would send that as an unsigned transaction to their wallet.
Sure.
They would sign it. When they submitted it, the payment would come to you. They'd get charged a little bit of fees. The extra...
And that's where your wallet would have said, you need this many tokens, PLTs, whatever it may be, and this amount of CCD because this is what the transaction is going to cost.
Exactly. Now, the extra step that we add here is before you send it back, one of the things that you added when you were creating the transaction is your address as the sponsor, and then you sign it with your keys, and then you send them back this pre-signed transaction that their wallet just displays to them and says, this is the amount of PLTs. When it gets to the how many CCD, it will just say it's a free transaction. This is covered for you by the sponsor. If they sign it and they submit it, you then get the payment and your account gets deducted. The
Awesome.
cost of the transaction, but their account gets deducted the payload amount of the transaction.
So in that scenario, it's the wallet that's actually writing the transaction, the final transaction to the chain directly, right?
It's the wallet that submits, yes.
Okay, so I guess here we're going to go a bit techie. Nonces, which is a wonderful word for this thing, right? Sequencing is another word, just in case people are wondering what we're talking about.
and this brings us to why we think that's the optimal way to do it. So each account transaction has a sequence number. On some chains, each sequence number that's submitted to the chain in order to be accepted needs to be higher than the previous one. Mm-hmm. On Concordium, it has to be sequential to the previous one.
Okay.
So if you create two transactions with sequential numbers and they get submitted out of order, rather than the one with the higher number meaning the other one can never be submitted, it's just not accepted until the other one's submitted. So you keep all the transactions. There's less risk of, I signed a transaction here, I signed a transaction there was this delay, and therefore the first transaction can never happen. Now it's just that it has to happen before the other one, and the other one can't happen until that one, which is slightly safer.
Okay.
The way that we've done sponsored transactions, we spent a lot of time looking at the issue of there are two accounts involved. Now, if they've both got these numbers that have to increment, you've got all these potential race conditions.
Yeah.
So the way that we are working with sponsored transactions is the sponsor actually doesn't increment their sequence number.
Okay.
What they're agreeing to is paying the fees. And the reason that we've done that way is the expectation is probably going to be a merchant. They just need to stay funded and they don't care so much. They could be dealing with like tens, hundreds, thousands of these in very short periods of time. If their sequence number could block any of those transactions, it's a problem for them. And if their sequence number could block any of the transactions, it's a problem for each individual customer of theirs who's submitting transactions.
Yeah.
So the way that it works is the customer's sequence number will be updated, which is why it makes sense for them to submit so they can keep the ordering right. And the sponsor just pays those small incremental fees when they're sponsoring. If they make another transaction, they want to move a bunch of PLT, then obviously their sequence number, because it's their transaction at that point. So this is now a transaction sequence number,
Okay.
rather than payment sequence number.
Awesome, perfect. That makes complete sense, right? I mean, this was. I remember having a fair amount of conversations. I know you guys had even more conversations about it. And we have a fast chain. It's going to do lots of transactions, and if a merchant is successful, which we hope all of our merchants are, they're going to need to hit this at a fast pace, and we didn't want to slow them down. And you kind of realize that one of the reasons the sequencing exists is because you want to make sure your transactions are in order. Whereas this isn't a transaction from my wallet because I'm a merchant who's sponsoring it. It's purely the fact that I'm saying I've got this fee covered. Now, in that scenario, I guess let's play it all out. What happens if I do run out of the fee? So I'm not fast enough. I've got 1,000 transactions happening. I had enough for the 999, but there's that one at the end that I just didn't top it up fast enough. What does the chain do? What's the behavior of it?
So unfortunately, that one is a hard one to solve for. So in that situation, the transaction is going to be rejected because
which makes sense. I mean, that ultimately.
Yeah. I mean, I think the mitigating factor there is, as you mentioned earlier, our transaction fees are very low and they are pegged. So a fiat pegged cent or so in euros means that you can quite easily keep yourself topped up enough to do sponsorship of transactions. If you're getting 1,000 transactions a day, it's going to cost you like 10 euros or so.
Yeah.
So, if you're throwing 100 euros a week into your shop, then you're going to get the benefit of all the PLT that's coming in, which is then spendable currency elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
When we're talking about large amounts, having a sequence number becomes important. If I've got 100 euros, then I want to be fairly sure that the 90 euro purchase and the 5 euro purchase and the 5 euro purchase and then the next 5 euro purchase, which one of those is in the right order to fail. But when I'm throwing out lots of micro transactions, which is what these really are for sponsorship, it's quite easy to maintain that level.
Yeah, and I guess that's the subtlety is, again, if you're a developer who's going to be working with a merchant to build this in, you got to keep that in mind, right? Your balance does become important, and if you are a fast pace where you are sponsoring a lot of transactions, then you want to keep a bigger buffer. I mean, as you say, it's a relatively small amount, so it shouldn't be too difficult to maintain a good enough buffer without having to put billions of tokens in a wallet somewhere. So that's cool. Okay, awesome. And I guess this was the kind of the logical scenario in this case, where we've got a merchant talking to a customer, or one merchant serving 1,000 customers. But just to be clear and make sure all the developers understand, it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't really matter who sponsors the transaction, right? If the use case warrants the user to do the sponsoring, whereas or me, whoever me is doing the sponsoring for your transaction, I can do that as well, right? It's not a kind of set in the chain that it's only this type of accounts that can sponsor.
No, any account can sponsor. The sponsor needs to be set up in that transaction header. So you need to decide who's sponsoring the transaction. But yes, it could be any party. Somebody could actually just run a sponsoring service where they say maybe for a particular PLT, we will sponsor any transaction using that PLT. So a PLT issuer, for example, could choose to cover the cost of all their PLT transactions.
Exactly. And I think this is kind of a good point to now that we have a bit more detail to understand kind of where the use cases really kind of come into it and why it gets a bit exciting, right? Because we can now, at a protocol level, have a gas station, lack of a better word, right? Where there's this entity who's going to sit on the chain and say, I'll take the currency of your choice, and I will make sure that I can sponsor the transaction, whatever transaction it is that you want to do somewhere. So, it almost becomes a ability to rock up with whatever currency you have, even on another chain. If we're talking about cross-chain verification, if you have your PLTs on Concordium, but you have your fees somewhere else, there's no reason why the gas station can't accept it and say, yep, I'll take this value and I will sponsor your transactions because I've got a whole bunch of CCD sitting here in my gas station.
Absolutely. It's a really good use case for things like bridges. If you want to bridge in and out of PLTs between chains, then on the Concordium side, you could, with your bridge, allow people to hold the wrapped tokens as PLTs and never have to pay CCD transaction fees because you sponsor it. Some other use cases we've been looking at are things like delegated spending abilities. So I can create a Concordium account. I can populate it with CCD. I can then create some other accounts that are never going to hold CCD, but they will hold PLTs. And that first account of mine would be the sponsor for them. And like going down that, what you can do as a developer route, I could actually build myself a wallet that always relied on one account to sponsor every transaction. It would construct them, ask that account to sponsor. And then I build a little dApp for that account that can look at how much is being spent, where's it being spent to, will I sponsor or not? And so I can start putting in some business logic on where that can be spent, which means I can give my kids stable coins and I can have a veto on what they're spending money on. And you know, it could be my real kids or it could be my robot kids. So this really opens stuff up for agentic payments as well.
Exactly, and it's kind of where it really starts getting exciting because of this little, and you think sponsor and transaction are a relatively straightforward, well-known kind of concept. It's not we've recreated the wheel here, but it does open up everything that we've been talking about, and it does set us up in that direction where things start making sense as to why we've been saying hold stable coins on Concordium. It's in your custody. We've now removed that extra blocker of the fact that you have to hold this CCD currency as well, which people didn't necessarily understand. But also as a result of it, we've also added an interesting new feature or ability, which is, as you say, I can fund the account, and if it doesn't have CCD, it doesn't go anywhere. Like, I literally cannot send that money anywhere. It's safer than anything else until I somehow get CCDs or, ask for a sponsorship or a gas station to actually verify that, which kind of adds another type of control over how the chain behaves, which is cool. And I guess, you touched on it there on the agentic payments. We're aware of, we've got a few partners as well who are working on the chain to kind of take us towards the X402 protocol and how Concordium PLTs with our identity can be used in that scenario. And that's, again, another unique point, which is very exciting when you add this to it, is the X402 facilitator can now actually also kind of manage the sponsorship process and how that works, right? I mean, I don't know if you've looked at it yourself or not.
Absolutely, and this is going to be one of the big enablers of the X402 facilitators for Concordium that are coming up. So, on a lot of chains, we're working basically with tokens and smart contracts. So there are ways of doing that. You allow the smart contract to accept contract updates from multiple users, or you delegate the ability to spend those tokens. Because we've gone down a very hard protocol enforced, protocol supported self-custodial thing, some of those weren't options. So what sponsored transactions allows is it means that the X402 facilitator can be the sponsor of a transaction. There's a whole back and forth with the facilitator anyway to set up the transaction as what the payment's for, how much it is. The sponsorship as part of that, again, it means that we can work. We're just with stable coins and have it work, as you said earlier, Pete, as if by magic, with a lot of stuff going on in the background.
Yeah, I think being a CTO, you kind of hear a lot of just do it by magic. We do those kind of things, but this is indeed one that is truly something that we can do. Look, I think that's a fair amount. We can start kind of putting it all together. And I think, just to kind of wrap it up, who actually benefits from this, right? And I think we've kind of touched on the fact that users benefit from it because they don't have to hold this CCD or fee structure that they don't necessarily know or understand. So it helps with the adoption. It means merchants can kind of be very in control as to kind of what they're doing, and again have better usage of their structure that they've set up because people are coming up and actually using it to pay, and hence they're not having to pay the card networks and all the other things that we spoke about. It also adds the ability to the chain to go more towards agentic payments, the X402 protocol. It also allows for new features like gas stations and things like that to be set up, or stable coins who are going to kind of come and say, do you know what, fees are covered. We're going to kind of run this for you, and you can just hold the PLT. And I think, this is kind of our narrative from the beginning. We are going towards in this direction. As we said, we released P9 with the PLTs. We've done P10 now with sponsored transactions. we're aware of P11 and P12, which has been coming kind of around the corner, and we're excited by it. And, watch this space. Things will carry on progressing at the protocol level. And yeah, look, if you want to find out more about us, visit our website, concordium.com, follow us on X, and, join our Discord and Telegram channels. Thank you very much for listening. And, we'll kind of see you next time in this space. Hopefully it was helpful. And if you have any questions, reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to discuss and help. And yeah, Andy, thanks for joining me. It's been a pleasure talking, as always. I mean, I think we talk to each other a lot, but this was a different way of talking.